Thank you all for coming, and really thank you for not being afraid of the snow. It's not coming for 5 more hours, so we're really glad that you're all here. And all of you that are watching live stream, thank you for joining us. We are very excited to present this series, Outside In with Philips. It's going to be a year-long look at what innovators, academics, government officials are bringing into the government to help the government become more efficient, faster, more nimble. And so we think it's just going to be a lot of fun to talk to a wide range of people over the course of the year. And it's just been a wildly fun event to work on because there's so many interesting innovators and it's just so fast moving. We have a very dynamic panel today that bring their own different perspectives to this. It will be moderated by Rick Burke, the executive editor of Politico, and it includes Joel Gurin, a senior advisor at the Governance Lab at NYU and an author of a new book that is very good. I just read it, called Open Data Now. Peter Levin, who is the founder and CEO of Amida Technologies, and who is widely credited with creating the Blue Button initiative at the VA, which allows veterans to now get their records instead of waiting for them. And Nick Sinai, who is a venture capitalist turned government official. He's at the White House. He's the deputy Chief Technology Officer, and in that job, he's overseeing the Open Data Initiative at the White House, and also has been instrumental in recruiting entrepreneurs to come into the White House and show them a thing or two. Before we bring our panel to stage, I'd like to take a minute and thank our sponsor, Philips. We're really delighted and excited to be working with them. And I bet you all didn't know that Philips actually invented the audio cassette, which I just found out today, and the VCR. But what's most interesting about them is that in the last 2 years, they have transformed themselves into this interesting cutting-edge company driving healthcare, wellness, and a host of other things in the world. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Frans van Houten.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you here to be here with us. I really enjoy that. I'd like to start with a few words on the reinvention of Philips, because I think you're now intrigued what this is all about. A 124-year-old company can easily lose its relevance and become a dinosaur and disappear. So we believe that as a technology company, as an innovative company, you need to look at the world's grand challenges. That's our North Star. And it is our commitment to make the world healthier and more sustainable. And when you look at the world's challenges and you see an aging population with more chronic disease and a larger world population needing food, water, and energy, that is not a sustainable picture. How can we reinvent that with the help of technology? This is what Philips is about. And indeed, today, 40% of our business is healthcare, 35% is energy efficient lighting, and the rest is our commitment to health and well-being for people. And our motto is innovation and you, what we can do to make people's lives better. So innovation is the leitmotif. This is what is all important for us. And we believe that innovation is not done in a cubicle or in a back office somewhere secretly, but rather through dialogue to uncover and discover the unmet needs that we can resolve through innovation. And this is why it is so exciting to be supportive of this dialogue on innovation, because we will inspire each other about what is possible. So I would like to welcome you here to this first inaugural session of Outside In, which will be this year-long event where we are partnering with Politico, and we hope that we really are going to be creative together and inspire each other about what is possible. Challenges that maybe are facing this nation or the whole world, challenges that may have solutions or not yet, and then by inspiration, we are undoubtedly going to find solutions, because we believe that through inspiration and dedication, we can find solutions for anything. This is what motivates 114,000 people at Philips, of which 22,000 here in the United States, our largest presence with more than 50 locations. And I tell our people, let's be entrepreneurial. and let's be imaginative, because then we can do great things to make the world a better place. I spoke about the open innovation and the collaboration that is necessary. Collaboration with academia, with public-private partnerships, with other companies, because then it's often at the adjacency where everything meets that you find the sweet spot of a breakthrough and where we can build truly a safer and healthier and more sustainable world. So we think of innovation as a team sport, And in this new age of connectivity, actually it becomes even crowdsourcing, where anybody can contribute. And we think that is fantastic. Of course, we have to adapt and we have to change our ways, but we are prepared to go through that courageous breakdown in order to become better. And we hope that other people share that passion. It's a journey that we are on. It's a journey that is going well. It's a journey that undoubtedly will get us to many more highs and lows, but that's part of the job. I thank Politico for the willingness and the collaboration to bring tough issues on the table in the panel so that we can have that dialogue and find new inspiration. And with that, I'd like to hand it back. And I ask, in fact, Richard, our panel host and moderator, to take over.
Thank you very much. I like that, innovation as a team sport. Before we begin, I just want to remind you all that #OutsideIn is our hashtag tonight, and you can Twitter a question to Rick. He will have a device on his lap, so any questions you want, just do that. And without further ado, here is Rick. Which way is he coming from? Rick Burke and the panel.
Thanks, Willis. Thanks, everyone, for coming, especially on this cold, stormy night. I think I'm very excited about this group because they've all worked either on both sides, in government and in the private sector, and that's just what we're talking about, the interaction between the two and how each can learn from one another. So you'll have to forgive me, even though it's going to be in a sort of upbeat session here, I got to start with a downer question, and that is the question that's on everyone's mind, and that is healthcare.gov. How did that happen? And not how it happened, but were you, first of all, I'll start. I want all three of you to answer this, but how did it surprise you, and what are the lessons to be learned?
Sure. Well, I'll go first. I'm not currently in government. I was at the Federal Communications Commission for a few years, and I think it was probably a surprise to everybody, certainly to those of us on the outside of government, knowing that this is a very tech-focused and very tech-savvy administration. But things happen. I think one kind of lesson you can take from it, and that I know a lot of people are looking at now, is what this says about government procurement, particularly of IT. Government procurement rules are very arcane. They tend to favor companies that are very, very good at understanding the rules of how to get a contract. And I know there's a lot of efforts now, like a program called Easy RFP, that's making it much easier, particularly for small companies, to bid on smaller contracts, which I think is a very good thing. But I think partly it just calls into question whether we just need a better way of getting IT into the government in a really innovative and agile way.
Peter, would you agree?
I agree mostly. I've written about this a little bit with Shahid Shah, and I think that there were some, in my view as a technologist, some fundamental management errors, right? There are aspects of building these large enterprise systems that are not very glamorous. Frankly, they're not very fun. And there's a lack of expertise both in the public and the private sector on things like how do you thoroughly test the program, how do you do things like load balancing, how do you know that you're going to be cyber secure. And we didn't do a great job, we collectively, the federal government, the administration, and the private sector, right? The guys like me who are on the other side now, who could watch and who should have watched more carefully, didn't do a great job saying, hey, listen, what were the test protocols? How much of this is actually an open source? What could we do to make sure that this was integrated a little bit more tightly and a little bit more clearly? The part that we don't talk about very much is sort of where the politics of this gets in. Clearly, procurement reform, probably the single biggest thing, but it's not the only thing. If we had gotten procurement right, we still wouldn't have been able to have fixed the problem, I think. You can't run large enterprise systems with lawyers, right? You need actually technologists to do that. And I think that we've learned that lesson. I think we're making great progress in compensating for past sins. And I'm personally very optimistic about it. I wish we didn't have to go through it, but I know for sure that it's going to work great.
Now, Nick, you're in the administration, but you had nothing to do with this, right? Are you stipulating that you have nothing?
So my boss, U.S. Chief Technology Officer Todd Park, was and is involved in the fixing of healthcare.gov. So he's testified about this, and in fact, I see him. He's been sleeping on his office on the office floor in October. He's really putting in night and day in the admirable effort to fix healthcare.gov, and it's doing a lot better now, and I think that's a really important point. But to both Joel and Peter's points, I think there are some important lessons to be learned about having the right people in place, about thinking about procurement reform, how we can build software more iteratively and more user-focused. I think those are always kind of important lessons as we think about not just healthcare.gov, but kind of future IT projects of different sizes and scopes.
Is there a larger issue here with the idea that with government and the whole the regulations and the restrictions and requirements and everything, the bureaucracy, that government just doesn't get technology and better turn to the private sector?
Horse feathers. So I spent most of my time working within the Department of Veterans Affairs, which is the second largest cabinet agency, which is, as you all know, well known for its moribund technology infrastructure, its porous cybersecurity, its inability to process a claim for all the people who come to work at 9:05, leave at 4:55, and take a 2-hour lunch. And it's garbage. I'm telling you that none of that is true. These people are dedicated, these people are smart, they certainly have problems with procurement, but they are forward-leaning and they are the most capable government team that I've encountered so far, and they're one of the most capable teams that I've ever worked with in terms of being able to work around structural impediments that are designed to make sure that we don't cheat. We're designed to make sure that we don't give somebody's brother-in-law or somebody's mom the money. It happens anyway sometimes, but at least it happens a lot less. So this notion that there's something inherent in public service or inherent in government that restricts it, that intrinsically restricts it from being on the leading edge of technology, I personally think is garbage.
I would say yes, and one of the most important aspects of the technology landscape today is that we're really in the middle of a data revolution. We're in the middle of a revolution around big data, and as I've written about, on open data as well. Open data being data that's made public in ways that it can do all kinds of things, including improve healthcare, improve the general well-being, start new businesses, and so on. This administration has been really at the forefront of the open data movement worldwide. Together with the UK, the US and the UK have been absolutely out front in recognizing the value of opening up government data, have developed an open data policy that was announced last May that is really in many ways radical in terms of how we treat data. People are saying it's the biggest change in how we treat federal data since the Freedom of Information Act, and that was back in the 1960s. So we're seeing not only, I think, some real capability on the pure IT side, but a real deep understanding of what data can do and why the kinds of data that are under government oversight are so important for the public.
Let me ask you, Nick, I mean, I'm sure most of the government workers are well-intentioned and working harder than the 9 to 5 and everything else, but if you work for the government and you send out an email or there's all kinds of restrictions on everything you do that's no one's fault, but that's just the way the world works in the federal government. How do you get beyond that? How do you overcome those inherent obstacles?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rick, and I think some of those obstacles are assumed because people think that those were kind of restrictions that is kind of how their predecessors acted, and with modern technology, they don't realize that there's new ways of doing things. So I think some things are in law or in statute and say that you can't do certain things, but then there's other opportunities to collaborate with the public, with other software developers in very kind of iterative ways, and that's the kind of thing that my office encourages. And so we're really excited to see a lot of that. And just as one small example, the Presidential Innovation Fellows Program, we bring in private sector ex-entrepreneurs and innovators for a tour of duty, 6 to 12 months. They come in and get partnered with inside innovators inside of an agency. They work on projects of national importance, like this open data initiatives, but also on the procurement reform that Joel mentioned, this RFP EZ project. And they really work iteratively, and I think that's key, is bringing in people and helping change the culture in an integrated way.
Peter, you also had success with the Blue Button project at the VA. Could you talk a little about that?
Sure. Well, for me, it's an example. Working with Nick very closely and with folks at OSTP, of course, the magnificent IT team at VA that gets really, I think, not enough credit and certainly a lot of grief in the press. To start with a very, very simple core idea: can you or can you not get access to things like your personal health information? There's nothing more sensitive, nothing more delicate, nothing more nothing that needs more cybersecurity than PHI. And we had just we collectively, society, had just sort of naturally assumed that you can't do it. It's not like money. If you lose your money, the bank gives it back. But there's no way you're going to be able to liquefy or liberate, as Todd says, as Nick says, liberate that data and make it go from one computer to another. Never mind, God forbid, actually give it to a veteran. So here are 21 to 91-year-olds who've carried weapons, who have fought for our liberty, and we trust them to shoot straight, but we don't trust them to hold on to a thumb drive with their immunization records. It just didn't make sense. It certainly didn't make sense to Anish and to Todd and to Farzad and to Nick and to me. So we went to Secretary Shinseki and we said, hey, listen, we've got this germ of an idea. We're not asking for money. Actually, I was a little bit cheeky. I said, I'm not actually even asking you for permission, but we're going to try this.
That's the only way to get anything done. Don't ask for permission.
We're going to try this. And he said, well, if it works, that's great. And if it doesn't work, you're fired. And it worked, right? So, I mean, how hard is it really to put somebody's name, address, immunization records, and a couple of physician notes into a record and say, okay, this is as much as we know about you today, and we're just going to keep in a methodical, incremental way, keep filling in that record, standardize it, and make it so that you can use it when you get your clinical services some other place. And lo and behold, it worked. So we had told Secretary Shinseki at the time, again, for no budget, that we thought that we might have 25,000 people at the end of the first year. And we had 25,000 people at the end of the first month. And the boss came into my office. You've heard the story 1,000 times. The boss comes into my office. It's 9 o'clock on a Friday night. Hey, everybody, it's time to go home. He literally stands over my desk. He said, I know you told me 25,000 in a year. Were you making that up? And I said, oh, no, sir, absolutely not. I was sandbagging till the end of the day, and I'm just so glad that we exceeded the expectation for you. And a big chuckle, and off he goes. Fast forward to today, 1 million veterans have downloaded their records. So, kind of knew that we were onto something.
You don't hear those kind of success stories in government lately, so that's good to hear. But let me just ask you, we have heard about the VA this week with members of Congress on the Hill talking about accountability issues, and does that tie into what you did, or since you left, things have gone downhill, or what's going on?
Oh yeah, no, the day I left, everything stopped, right? So the VA is a peculiar thing, right? So on the one hand, whether you play for the red team or the blue team or for no team at all, everybody, I think, is deeply committed to services to veterans, whether it's employment services or service-connected disabilities or health services. Nobody argues with this. And so you get a lot of bipartisan support for the VA budget, which is large, right? It's $160, $170 billion. And we spend a lot of money in taking care of our veterans, as we should. On the other hand, we spend a lot of money out of the VA in IT. So what Joel and Nick were talking about a few minutes ago with this procurement reform, well, everybody wants a piece of that. And that's where things kind of get a little dicey and things get a little messed up. I can tell you for sure and for certain, as somebody who had access to that data and who was on the inside for a long time, the situation is not as you read it in the press. It is much, much better. There's a lot of political posturing. Everybody likes to beat up on the VA because of the cybersecurity breach 7 years ago, because of the claims process inabilities, which are actually going down. For a lot of things, where the VA itself can't actually respond and where people make political hay out of it. But I think from an operational perspective, you won't find a better hospital system in the United States, period.
Joel, can you talk a little about open data? That's been one of your areas of...
Sure. Well, open data is, as I said, it's the basic idea is that you're making data public and freely available in a way that can be put to all kinds of uses. It's different from big data. I mean, big data can be data that, for example, a major retail chain or a credit card company has about all their customers. You don't want that to be open. You want them to hold that close and use it for their own analysis and other purposes. Open data is stuff like weather data, GPS data, all kinds of data about education, health. Some of it, like Blue Button, is giving people back their own personal data. A lot of it is just putting data out there for everybody
So it's
to
not
use.
data that people should be worried about. I mean, it could help their lives.
It could help their lives, and it is generally not data with any kind of personal identification in it. If it is, like Blue Button, then it's delivered in a very specialized way just to that individual. Generally, open data means it's out there, and it's out there because it can be out there. You know, nobody's going to be hurt by knowing what the satellite images are that affect our weather and everything else. We're all going to learn from that. So this administration and other countries and some cities and states have been doing a lot to liberate open data. And I think it's very interesting. On the one hand, it's really unleashing potentially billions of dollars or even more in economic value. And at the GovLab at NYU, where I work, I'm now leading a study called the Open Data 500. We're identifying 500 companies that use open data as a key business resource, and we're finding them in every sector you can imagine. But I think in terms of some of what we've been talking about, we're starting to see an expectations gap, that as people understand the value of technology and understand the value of data, I think there's going to be more and more demand on federal agencies. It's like, I want it now, it ought to be accurate, it ought to be readable, it ought to be machine readable, computable, where's my data? So I think that in many ways, while I think we all agree that the federal government does a much better job than is usually acknowledged at IT and at data and so on, there's a lot of legacy systems to deal with, and there's a lot of legacy bad data to deal with, and we're seeing the demand ramp up now in a way that it's, I think, going to put some real pressure on government agencies to catch up.
How does you paint a very positive picture of what could happen and what the possibilities are, but how does the whole, to bring up another downer here, the whole Snowden fiasco affect all of this? I mean, it's about people not trusting the government, companies not trusting the government, people worried about their security. I mean, it raises all kinds of issues. Doesn't it make it harder for all of you to do what you're trying to do?
Undeniably. I mean, when you think about open data, but I think there's a fundamental confusion. You know, people tend to think of data as some amorphous thing made up of a whole lot of ones and zeros that somehow does something. Open data, by definition, national security data, you would never expect to be open data. So let's say that the NSA had been monitoring terrorist activity or potential terrorist activity in a way that every American agreed was completely appropriate, which I think we don't agree about what actually happened. But let's say that they were doing it in what we all said was the right way. You would not expect all that national security data to be available to download on your own computer. So I think we have a recognition that some stuff really should not be open data. I think the issue at NSA was not just that they were holding it secret, but what they were monitoring and how much they were doing. So in a sense, it's not an open data issue, but it definitely taints the idea of open public data.
People, Peter, Nick, do people make those distinctions?
Sometimes. I mean, sometimes they make those distinctions and sometimes they don't. And so I think it's helpful to have people like Joel, as well as the administration, continue to kind of make those kinds of points. And to your earlier question, yes, it absolutely poses some challenges, and it means that we have to earn back that trust. Absolutely. And trust is tremendously important, right? And so when you think about trusting the government to inspect the food or make sure that our roadways are safe, or all of those kinds of critical things is tremendously important. And I see my colleagues, I don't work on this issue, the surveillance issue myself, but I see my colleagues working so hard on this balance between protecting Americans and making sure that we're protecting civil liberties.
But think about how do you get people to trust their government? I mean, they don't trust. I know as a journalist, they don't trust us, so they don't trust us. That's really hard to overcome. How do you overcome? How do you trust government given what's been going on? What do you do proactively?
Yeah, and so I think part of that is a continued focus on transparency and to be as transparent as we can without kind of divulging sources or things that we can't do. And so there's that balance.
Can you give me an example of something like that you have?
Yeah, well, so I'm not in the surveillance
Right.
space. I can't really
But
speak.
doesn't it affect everything you do?
Sure, absolutely. It does. There are kind of ripples that, I mean, I do a lot of great work on, with a lot of colleagues on opening up government data as fuel for private sector entrepreneurs. And so whether they're using weather data or whether they're using agricultural data or energy data, all of that. And so I think we just need to keep telling those stories. And so I put it back also on the media is there's an opportunity to tell the stories of companies like Climate Corporation. There's a great example. A Google engineer founds this company in 2006, uses weather data from commerce, uses soil data from agriculture, uses NASA data, and he creates farm insurance and apps for farmers. And so what farmers care about is being able to get apps and crop insurance for their particular field. They don't care about it kind of for the state or regionally. What they really care about is if their crop is going to fail, to get paid out in time and to be able to manage proactively their crops and to plant higher margin crops. And so that matters. And so being able to crunch all of this data and turn it into user-friendly apps and services for farmers really, really matters. And so this is something that started in 2006. It's now $1 billion corporation. And so it's a great example of kind of adding value from open government data.
Just one thing, and I'll move on from that. When the Snowden thing broke out, it sort of became a big controversy. Did it make your day-to-day job harder?
We got the occasional question, sure, but I think the everyday entrepreneur, the everyday public citizen was interested in either they're interested in kind of transparency data, or they're interested in agriculture or geographic data or what have you. So people are interested in a lot of different things, and I've had to answer those questions many times. Right. But I think the more interesting thing is that Blue Button has spread to the private sector. 150 million Americans can now get access to Blue Button. Green Button, which is essentially an analog in energy, which the administration partnered with electric utilities. Now 100 million Americans can get access to their household energy usage data. So that's data that they can use to make decisions about their own energy use, and they can use that as fuel for products and services that they trust. And I think that's important. And one of the things in regaining the trust is showing that we're continuing to empower Americans and trust Americans. And one of the ways is with their own data and giving access back to the taxpayers have paid for this. And so where it can be open, we should make it completely open. And where it's personal, we should make it available back to the American citizen.
Peter, let me just ask you that with Politico, we reported some new rules today that the administration announced on improving cybersecurity, but they were criticized as not being as extensive as the administration had wanted in the first place. Do you have a sense of what that's about?
No, I can't speak to that directly. I have been involved in cybersecurity, but I was not involved in any cybersecurity project during my time at VA, except for the protection of records. I know that the administration is being thoughtful and thorough, and especially in the era of Snowden, and understanding how much transparency should we have. Clearly, we needed more. Whether you agree with how he did what he did, certainly it started a healthy conversation. But I wanted to answer a question you asked a few minutes ago about trust. And I think that you build trust in public services and you build trust in government the same way you build trust with your spouse and your family and your friends and your business colleagues. You do what you say you're going to do, and you don't do what you say you won't do. And if you can hold fast to those two rules, I think that you're going to see an inflection and a transformation in our relationship to our government, our relationship to this administration and future administrations. And I think that if there's any silver lining around the Snowden cloud, it's that we are now going to start having those conversations. And I think that open data is a mechanism, thanks to the work of Todd and thanks to the work of John Farmer and thanks to the work of Nick, that we now have the tools as a society, as a nation, to get the ground truth data. And if we can say, well, look, you said you were going to release all the medical records. You said you were going to put electric consumption on the web so for people to see. You said you were going to do things in education. Let's do it. And we know how to measure it. We know how to use it. We know what the economic benefits are. But this sort of intangible thing that's hard to measure, I think people overthink it. I think you just do what you say you're going to do and you're okay.
Well, I would say, in addition to that, particularly when it comes to data, which is at the heart of so much of this, agencies have to be responsive. And my experience, not only working in a federal agency, but talking to people in many agencies, both for work I did in the government and also in the work I'm doing now, is that there's tremendous variability. So I agree with Nick that the Climate Corporation is just a stunning example of the use of open data. However, I've interviewed the CEO of the Climate Corporation, some of those data sets from one agency. He had to go through the Freedom of Information Act repeatedly to get access to public data. So I don't think that's the norm. I think most agencies now are really on board with this idea, but not all. And I think a lot of the trust is going to come from showing a real responsiveness. And one other piece of that is to be responsive to requests that come from individuals or the business community. Historically, the way we've approached open data is that agencies have said, we have data, we think it's useful, here it is, please do something with it. Now you're going to see more and more business people coming to government saying, yeah, that's very nice. What I really want is that data set there. Can you give it to me? And the more the answer is yes, the more trust is going to be built.
Are there any collaborations, public-private, that haven't worked that you can talk about lessons you've learned?
Well, it's not so much that a collaboration didn't work. I think that if we're doing them right, we learn things and we pivot. I mean, that's kind of the way business works, whether you're a startup or whether you're a large company, is you try things or you come in with a certain hypothesis. And so we've done a number of collaborations around using technology to help solve important problems. So technology for disasters. After a disaster, thinking about the role of the internet, the role of technology in...
Can you be more specific with one example of a company that was
Well,
really
so this wasn't actually with a company, but we had another example, and I'll give you a little bit more specifics, is we were thinking about technology for combating human trafficking. Mm-hmm. And so we had a hypothesis about the kinds of tools and the kinds of practices that technology could bring to the problem. But when we got all the experts in the room, and that included the experts in fighting human trafficking, not just technology experts, it turned out that some of the initial ideas that we had would have just moved the problem from one place to another. And so that's why we've done a number of brainstorming sessions. We like to call them data jams. We do these brainstorming sessions. The agencies go out to hackathons where software developers get together and try and build apps for the weekend. Roundtables, other kinds of mechanisms, online forums, and you have kind of the conventional incentive prizes and challenges. But those things help with these partnerships because you'll find oftentimes that what you went in with, that early hypothesis, is not kind of what actually gains scale and traction. And that's why it's so important to be iterative when we're delivering services or when we're thinking about public-private partnersps. Mm-hmm.
I have a story for you.
Good. I could tell you were like ready to.
Oh, I know exactly that one. Yeah. So this speaks to procurement reform, and the thing that is fundamentally broken about our procurement reform in the United States is that we are defaulted to a policy that you can summarize as choose once, choose wisely. So for those of you who don't know, what happens is guys like the three of us write encyclopedias worth of requirements and specifications. That takes a good year. And then we go out and we bid it, and that takes another year. And then one of the companies that you know wins that bid, and it takes another 5 years. And by the time they come back with the thing that you thought you wanted, like an orange, they're bringing you a VW. right? And it's like, well, wait a second, how did that happen? We'll read the specs. It was in the specs. So we tried it a different way, and this was a broken play. It's a good example of a broken play, where one of those companies. This is a distinguished company. It's a respected company. We did a very fast procurement using a so-called agile approach, which is we don't try to tell you what we want. We try to tell you how much time you have, and you try to do as much as you can in that sprint, in that interval. And they win the contest. They, best value, lowest price, whatever it is. And there's this meeting. And it feels a lot today like it did that day. It was me, and there was a whole bunch of other people in the room. And there was a leader, and it says, okay, so what did you really want? I said, well, I wrote what I really wanted. It was in the requirements. Yeah, come on, really? We can't do that. We bid this thing so low. There's no way you're going to get that. What is it that you were really trying to tell us? And my response was, this story ends badly for you, right? This is not going to work out, right? And it ended up that they built what we asked for in the time that we asked for it, and they bled money on it. It was very embarrassing for them. And so I think that I wouldn't call them a breach of public-private partnership. I'd want to be a little bit more politically correct than that, but the stress and the tension of public-private partnership does pivot around this change in procurement, and frankly, the integrity and the honesty and the transparency of actually doing what you say you're going to do. In this case, they tried to get away with something and they didn't, and the next time it went better.
Yeah, I think public-private partnership is an evolving concept, and I think it's evolving in some very interesting ways. So, one model is government has a job to get done. They have to hire a private contractor. How do they do that in a way that works really, really well? Kind of the other end of the spectrum is what we're seeing with some of the open data companies that are springing up, where what the government really does is it puts out data, and what the company really does is it uses it. And that's almost too far at arm's length, because the risk is that the people who are distributing the data won't really know the needs of the people who want to use it, and the people who are using it won't have a way of getting what they need out of the data holders. So one of the things we're trying to do with this Open Data 500 project is not just analyze all the companies that are out there and see what data they're using, although that's a big part of it. We really think that we can play a facilitating role. We're at NYU, we're an academic institution. We think we can help facilitate more conversation between the data users and the data holders, because that's what's been missing. And it's not a partnership in the sense of any agency picking one company. They wouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. But it's a sense of several agencies being responsible to several companies in a sector that just kind of makes the environment better and more productive for everybody.
I see. Nick, let me ask you about recruitment for talent. I mean, you want in the administration, the most creative, innovative people, but what's your pitch to someone from, say, Google, who's making a ton of money, can get paid a lot more, live in a fancy place in California? What's your pitch for them to come here and work for you with all these rules and regulations? And what do you tell them?
You want to come make some real impact? Come to the federal government. You want to work on some of the most challenging problems. It doesn't matter whether you're a data scientist or a designer. There are some of the most interesting, challenging problems in federal government. And there's some of the most exciting and innovative people in government too. And so we actually have recruited people from Google to be Presidential Innovation Fellows and other kind of places in government. And so,
where does their pay go from here?
Well, it's tough to compete with
but I'm serious. It really, what do you say? We're gonna cut your salary. We're gonna go through all this bureaucracy. It's really tough. How do you make that case when you have the backdrop of healthcare.gov looming?
Oh, I think people want to work on hard problems and they want to have impact, exactly right? And so here's a chance to have impact at enormous scale. I mean, just think about this. We're talking about the information policy for the entire federal government. We're talking about affordable health care for all Americans. I mean, you're just talking about these massive issues. And so the chance to come and work on those and advance the ball in a way is, I mean, yes, you can go join a startup, and we encourage people to go do that. I mean, that's fantastic. But some of them will want a tour of duty for a few years or maybe their career in federal government, and that's fantastic too.
I have to say, my 3 years in federal government, I met the smartest, most committed, most dedicated people I've ever worked with, and I've worked with a lot of really good people.
Peter, if you had a magic wand and you could change the way government approaches technology and innovation to make it easier for these talented, eager people to do better work, how would you change the way government operates to make it more friendly to innovation?
That's a great question that I don't have a clear answer for. I would make it more responsive, right? That there's this. I think that we think of government, and I certainly thought of government. I'm of an age where government was building a nuclear weapon, building a submarine, building an aircraft carrier, building a high-rise apartment. And that mindset and that mentality, that distribution of wealth, resources, provisioning, leads you to a certain approach and a certain framework of how you would say, well, what am I going to do to contribute specifically and sincerely to the national defense? If you're part of a team that's bolting on the hull of a submarine, you're making a huge impact, but you can't see it. Today, with web-enabled technologies, with cloud-based services, with open data, you can, as an individual, not in a self-aggrandizing or self-important way, I'm not speaking to that kind of vanity, but I'm speaking to the satisfaction that you can have and say, I did that and it wouldn't have existed if I didn't. Right? And by opening the aperture and by allowing a little bit more fluidity and flexibility, by creating a substantive and trustful communication channels, I think that you're going to do a much better job of recruiting the next generation that is absolutely every bit as committed to public services as we were of an older generation, except for Nick, right? But that we really wanted to make a difference. It was an incredibly important part of my life to give something back. And I think that the guys coming behind me are even more committed to that, but they're going to be less tolerant with the nonsense, right? They're going to be less tolerant and less patient with the nonsense. It's more like, call me when you need me, call me when I can actually do what you've asked me to do. And we can, with very simple changes, we can make it better for them.
I gotta, before we end this, I have to tell you my favorite political technology story because I just can't resist. And that is, back in 2008 when McCain had the Republican nomination, a reporter, one of my reporters asked me, I have one question for McCain, the presidential nominee, what should I ask him? And I said, ask him how he uses the internet, because it'll tell the public and the voters a lot about how a public servant operates in this day and age. And this wasn't that long ago, 2008. And his answer surprised even me. It was, I am learning to get online myself, and I will have that down fairly soon. I don't email. I've never felt the particular need to email. And he also said that he had his staff go online and print out things so he could see them. And I say this not to make fun of McCain, but we had then Obama, who was a very high-tech campaign ran against him, and then he seemed to be sort of to comprehend the needs for healthcare.gov. So I guess my question is, how important is it for our leaders and our elected officials to understand these issues and technology? And do you find that the generation now in charge and running Congress have an adequate, sufficient grasp of these issues? And does it affect how they're carried out?
So I can't speak for Congress.
I'll do
But
that. I'm happy to address that for you.
But the president is obviously tech savvy, and I mean, we have pictures in our office of him using his iPad and bringing that kind of tech savviness to the administration has been one of the fun things, because it's not just the person at the very top, but it's all of the people in the administration, right? And so it's all of the folks who work in the White House, but also across the administration at various levels. And so I think that's really what's important when you think about governing and you think about administration. It's certainly it's important to have those symbols at the top, but it's also important to have the people who are running the programs and who are leading the departments.
Yep. Many of the people who are making technology policy, education policy, healthcare policy, energy policy are utterly illiterate in the decisions that they're making. I don't actually begrudge them that. I begrudge them their disdain. that somehow they belittle those of us who have spent our lives and our careers learning the detailed mathematics, the difficult science, the thick glasses, pocket protecting guys who actually built the things that we enjoy today. And I don't think that I don't know that we need to find a way to bring these two social groups together. I'm not naive or Pollyannish about that. But somehow the condescension of Congress around these issues is...
Both parties, or?
Yes. Yes. Is really, really destructive, right? But it falls into sort of the general framework, which I'm not expert in, is, why is Congress so ineffective, and why can't the parties get along, and what are the more fundamental issues that are dividing the country that have absolutely nothing to do with this. So I see this more of a symptom as a problem than the actual problem itself. But I think that there's a solution here. If we can find folks from both parties who are literate, who do understand, who have a point of view and who know how to articulate it. Even if I don't agree with it, I'd rather have an argument with somebody who actually understands what we're discussing. And I find that very difficult. A perfect example of this, just to put it out there, is the VA-DoD health record transfer, right? Mm-hmm. Where Congress has utterly abdicated their responsibility in that conversation because they don't know how to have the conversation. And so you have one department off spending billions or tens of billions of dollars on exactly the wrong system that'll do exactly the wrong thing. It sounds like this abstract academic argument, but it's not. It's a matter of life and death for thousands of people, literally. So that's, for me, a personal example of why this is such a serious and important question.
Joel, do you find the same thing?
Yeah, I would just say, to sort of summarize, I can't speak for Congress either, and I'm really glad of that. But I think there's, despite all the issues in Congress, there's a lot that can be done at the federal agency level, and that is being done, and with the president's leadership as well. I think ultimately this is going to have to change, and it will change because of a number of different pressures. Some of it is pressure from within the administration in a positive way. Some of it is pressure from civic organizations that really believe in the power of technology and the power of data. Some of it is going to be from individuals who really want the data and the technology to serve them, and a lot of it is going to be from business, not just Silicon Alley, not just or Silicon Valley, or in New York, where I'm from, Silicon Alley, not just those guys, but any business increasingly that wants to have anything to do with the government or government data, and that's a lot of businesses, is going to set a higher bar. And ultimately, for any business-focused politician, which is, I think, ultimately going to be most of them, this is going to be a need that they'll have to respond to.
But just to follow up one thing, I mean, Peter was very harsh about elected officials being condescending, not really understanding technology. Do you feel that way? Do you see these public officials that have control over the purse strings that really don't know what they're talking about?
To be totally honest, other than as a news viewer, in my career in government, I really had very, very little to deal with in Congress, so I wouldn't want to speak to that. I do think on a positive level, there's a lot of very good activity on the agency level that actually I found surprisingly positive.
Well, I'm happy to end this on a very up note, so thank you very much. It's wonderful to hear your comments. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And thanks for all our viewers on the live stream. I really appreciate that. And now I know we want to hear more again from Mr. Von Houten to give us a final goodbye.
Well, Joel, Peter, Nick, that was a fascinating discussion. Challenging views, some critical views, but then again, only then will we have the real debate about where we need to go. Philips is a technology company. I very much appreciate some of your comments. I think you did a fabulous job. I hope you all enjoyed it thoroughly. There's more to come. This series will continue. I think we will have this debate here in this room. Philips is proud that we are able to enable it. We are not sitting there. I would have loved to sit there and give some views, but that was agreed not to do it because, this is
I would have loved to have
voices
you here
from
to
the street. We do that next time then, right? I have one remaining thing to do, and that is actually to invite you to a small innovation celebration as an inspiration. We have set up a innovation show at Porter Gallery, which usually has an image of, well, you show there what's the past. We are going to show you that we transform it. So as a teaser, I would like you to take you there on a journey of inspiration on how healthcare is transforming, how light can change your life, and how we can improve the health and well-being of people. It is done, of course, under strict rules and regulations that I don't understand about what we can say and what we cannot say. So it is done in an arty way and not as a commercial. And I hope that you will all join us and have a good time and have a bit of relaxation as the snow is not yet here tonight. So thank you so much. And again, big applause for all of you. Thank you.
And I hope you all will join us for the next in this continuing series all year. Thanks very much.
Thank you.